Hello there and welcome to Delivered, the show where we talk about building great digital products and even greater businesses. My name is Chris Bradshaw. I'm the Product Strategy Director here at Infinum, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. So the guest tonight is Tim Daines, and what an awesome guest it is. He basically has 15 plus years working in the AI and data fields and helped such brands like McKinsey Co., AWS, Hitachi at building innovative products with AI at its core. And most importantly, working around how to build products ethically, sustainably, and responsibly, and most importantly, making sure that they bring great value to the company and their chosen audience. So before we get into that and talk to Tim, please make sure you enter any questions you have for Tim in the Q&A box somewhere in your interface, and make sure that they are clear and concise, and we'll save them all for afterwards, and I'll make sure we get through as many as we can with Tim with the time we have. So, enough talk from me. Let's talk to Tim. Let's learn about some AI. Let's go. Hello, Tim Daines. Welcome to Delivered.
Hey, Chris. Great to be here this evening.
Thank you for coming. It'd be weird otherwise, just me. And I am very, very excited and slightly concerned also about what this is going to unveil. Like for me, AI is very, very, I guess the promised land is there, the scary land is over here, and I really want to make sure we discuss all things for the audience today. But before we get into any of that big, wide-thinking stuff, let's just talk about you. Why are you qualified to talk about this? You've been in AI for a long, long time, before it even became like a trendy thing, right? So let's just talk about you, your origin story. Like, where'd you come from, Tim?
Yeah, so my background is in engineering and social sciences. So I've started very much from building things from electrical devices to then coding, and then gradually moving into how humans interact with technologies. And so as you mentioned, I sort of first came into AI about 15 years ago. When I was studying around simulations and what happens when humans start collaborating with simulators, and what happens to their beliefs, what happens to how they trust the interaction with that simulator and the information that they get from it. And I started to learn a lot about what could go wrong, but also what could go right, and actually what are the opportunities that we're not seeing, where we're sort of still, and at the time we were still very wedded into sort of Victorian-based thinking, and we weren't thinking about actually, if I work with a machine, a simulator, what could actually happen, and what does that do to the human mind and how we problem solve. So ever since then, I have worked across different industries and education, so building AI solutions that stop students from cheating in exams. I've then worked in the healthcare and the life science industry, looking at how do we optimize clinical trials so we actually find the right patients against the right inclusion and exclusion criteria for a trial, reduce the amount of spend to optimize to make a drug, and then looking to actually completely digitizing a hospital, flipping it completely on its head, and actually building AI into clinical decision-making processes to improve the flow around hospital decision-making around bed management. And then in the last recent years, then really looking at how do we get to sort of using real-world data that comes out of ourselves when we go into hospital, when we go into GPs, and we're actually sort of giving our bloods and any kind of observation data. And how do we turn that into real-world evidence where we can actually start to simulate what's going on before we actually build something for real. And I'd say so the last couple of years has then sort of moved on to me actually building my own business to then actually help people look at, well, how do I build a go-to-market, not just AI solution, but data solution. Because a lot of the AI that people, I think I've come across and seen today is actually, well, I just want this AI and I just want that AI. But really the sort of underpinning thing that I'm finding more and more is actually the naivety around data. and actually, well, what's the story you want to tell with data, and how do you want your people to move with data in an organization when they don't actually even understand how to govern it? So the last few years have been sort of looking at actually look at how to build data cataloging systems, how to build data products, and then how do you actually then link that with operational governance, with shifting people to working with data, and then defining their job with data, and then taking that and turning it into AI solutions where they work with AI to actually develop jobs of the future that they don't even know exist yet.
Yeah, and there's a real anthropological part to this as well. And I think when you say AI and data, you naturally just lean into like technology, robots, sci-fi, just tech. But actually what we're really seeing and what will happen more than anything is the actual shift in how people interact with AI, how their jobs will be managed or in partnership via AI solutions long term. So I suppose that creates a real like fear and opportunity dynamic between the two, which is certainly something that I worry about very few things in life, but I also fear the AI displacement without the proper management of it. And I think looking at it from a people's point of view, you touched on it there, right? The workforce. Where do we see, or where do you see from your experience really the kind of like promise and fears around this with AI being introduced faster, into our day-to-day businesses?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite ironic. So last night I was actually watching Channel 4 and they had the latest Terminator film on. So I think it's Arnold Schwarzenegger's last hurrah. But I think one of the things I sort of took away from the film, really, even though it's very sci-fi, is the language of the film changed to today's language that we're using in the real world. So they talk about Skynet, but then they also talk about how Skynet was defeated. And then they talk about Legion, which is the alternative universe after Skynet was defeated. But the common language that was used was, we built the AI, and the AI machines took over, and then it scaled, and then a new war came, and whatnot. So I suppose, if I think about ultimate fears, are we going down a road of what Terminator looks like? I'm not even going to say that's a possible future, but I think I think on the fear level, it's there's definitely AI anxiety, and it's on the rise, and I do see it, and I think one of the rapid advances at the moment is generative AI, because it's prompted huge big questions about future of workforce and how does it affect human creativity. I mean, we've all seen things now where actually you put into DALL-E for OpenAI and it comes out with images. You've now got Mid-Journey where you can start creating images, and you wonder, well, actually, who actually did that? Was that a human, or was that AI? And it's getting smarter. So I think that anxiety bit is something not to be ignored, because I am seeing clients now who are saying, actually, I want to completely replace my workforce with generative AI, because all of this is basically document knowledge management systems, and I can catalog that now and query it. How do I improve the quality of the query using my generative AI or generative AI? Because that saves me 10 people doing that job, and I can optimize my costs. So that is a real reality that's happening now, and I think it's accelerating.
Yeah, scary.
But I think on the other end of the spectrum, it's the the positives of that are actually the way I've really come to learn AI now is actually it's opportunities about how do we use AI to replace the manual work that's going on, so that we can automate that and then free ourselves up to solve those more hard, complicated problems where we don't get the headspace to do that because we're so embroiled in manual, linear ways of working.
Yeah, and actually, very recently at Infinum, we did a study on this, and there's some quite interesting stats that I'll just throw at you to get your comment on, because I think you're right in terms of like the risk and reward here, and I think the risk is, like you're saying, the speed of this is now happening faster than ever, generative AI, etc. And from what we found from our kind of research paper, which we'll also share in the chats later on, is that 78% of companies are ready to heavily invest in AI this year, right now. That's no surprise. Everyone's talking about it. It's a thing. But what we also uncovered was 73% of them were unprepared to integrate AI into operations or know where to start. So that's a staggering, for me, almost alarming stats where it's like you throw money at something, but I think like previous technologies, you can throw money to it, and if it doesn't work or it works, great. But like with this, it's almost like once you've unleashed the genie, so to speak, into your organization and you're doing it, that's where the huge risk lies. But equally, I think the promised land is the opportunities there, if done right, will give you a significant competitive edge. And I think from our point at Infinum, we're trying to be the guides here and guide these kind of like brave adventurers who want to delve into AI, but doing it right from the first point and not just investing and turning it on, because once it's on, it's a different beast. So I'd love to hear your comments around those stats.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to me that's coming out. Where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah.
And I think a common mistake that I have come to learn through doing several digital transformations now with AI is that the first thing that a lot of organizations do is they go and hire a huge workforce, and they'll go and hire a load of data scientists, and they'll spend a lot of money, and then what will happen is that they'll conflate all the tasks to do with data and AI into that data science job. I mean, one example of that is where I worked on a digital transformation, actually in a public health, in a public sort of health hospital, and that first year was very much, I think it was about 75, 80 people, literally just building. Well, what do we build in terms of trying to optimize pathways to specialisms? 12 months later, we still hadn't built anything that was productionizable. And the main reason that we hadn't done that was because we didn't really take ourselves back to, well, first of all, have we understood why do we need AI? And is it really going to solve a problem? And then second of all, it's, well, if we want to do this with AI, do we actually have the source of record data? And how much do we trust that data? Who entered that data? What's the governance with how we got to that data, with where it lives today? Who's cleaned and touched that data? So we're talking about in the technical world, lineage. Why did data set A connect with data set B to connect with data set C to generate data set D? But within that, you need to collect metadata. So you've got your business metadata, which is why did the business put it together? And then you've got your technical metadata about, well, what's the technical reasons for why that data is structured in the way that it is. And more often than not, what you tend to find is the business metadata is missing. So you never know why that was put together. So, I mean, having walked away with those failures really is the lessons learned from that is really start with what is that problem that you're trying to solve? Take it back to your business strategy, take it back to the human problem. Because sometimes AI may not be the answer. And it may just be that you just need to clean certain data up and you just need to provide a minimum viable data set to then start getting people to experiment on, to change their behaviors, build trust with data. And then you can start identifying, well, actually, I wish this was automated and I wish that was automated, and we could optimize here, we could optimize there. Those are questions now that could start spurring, oh, right, we might have an opportunity for AI. Exactly. So I think the other challenge with, listening to those stats is the fact that companies today have not been built for advanced analytics. We never built the planet for advanced analytics. We're still trying to work out how to build apps that work really well in e-commerce. We're still trying to optimize around, should I build an app? Should I build a desktop application? I'm still walking into companies who are still very much building, we'll just build a load of screens. We'll just build a load of reports and we'll do that and we'll serve up, and creating huge amounts of duplication. And very much we're sort of in a kind of a report-driven culture. We're not in a very sort of analytical way in which we work. So, we hear buzzwords about data-driven, but do we really understand what we mean by data-driven? And data-driven for me is actually, do people come into work in the morning and actually understand, well, what is it that I need to do with data today in order to get to my goal? And what is it I've got to do in terms of whether the quality of that data is right? Do I trust it? And if I don't trust it, who do I need to go to get that cleaned up? Where and where do I socially validate if I can't do that? And that's quite common behavior at the moment that I see. And so I do feel it's a bit of shiny toy syndrome.
Yep.
Let's just have the latest toys. A bit like when the App Store came out from Steve Jobs. It was everyone wanted an app, so we made a load of apps, and a load of those went everywhere. And so it's kind of, I kind of look at it as let's use the easiest thing first to get to the easiest prize before starting on the boring stuff.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I was just thinking, I've been advertised recently on my YouTube feed about how to make, the first £10,000 a month using ChatGPTs. And it's like, that's the new App Store, you should do that. And that's fine. But I think your point you mentioned there is super important. And I always look at this from a strategy point of view first. And I might be biased because that's my role in this business. But AI is still just technology. And if you look at the Venn diagram around, human beings, people, the users, the business, and then the tech, AI still fits in tech, and that middle part still needs to be created, which is that combination of the strategy, talking to the users, talking to the tech, enabling the business strategy. And I think sometimes I've heard conversations where that's been lost, and it's been, we just build AI, everything's great. But the fear I have is like AI has the propensity to be great and speed things up in terms of like, faster this, better that, cheaper this. But equally, it speeds up the potential. Well, the problem that could happen if it's not done right is it's escalating at speed critical mass problems if not pointed in the right direction. So I always think what you're saying there is start with like the strategy, the guidance systems, the why more than anything, and let's just validate that. And I think for me, so let's just take some like quite big meta we're talking about here. Let's just get down to like the weeds of it. I'm sure lots of listeners at home are leaders in businesses trying to figure out how to deploy it into their business. And I'm a business owner. I have a global finance company, for example. Where do I even start with like embarking on this AI journey? Is it first just looking at the fundamentals, like what do I actually have? Is it the data? Is it the infrastructure? Is it the new shiny ChatGPT alternative? Like where does someone even start at this from like an executive level?
So I think it goes back to really the sort of very top. What's the mission of the company? What's the vision of the company you're trying to achieve? What's your roadmap for where do you want the company to be in X amount of years? Have you got shareholders that they want to know what's coming while they keep investing? So it's going to be commercially driven first of all, and then I think really it's then what's going on with your customers, and are you losing traction, or are you finding that your competitors are bringing something in? And I don't sort of say to a lot of clients, actually worry about your competitors. It's actually worry about your customers and about how they're feeling about your brand and what do they value. So it's very much trying to understand that vision piece first of all about, well, why do you think AI is going to help your brand in the future? But the real fundamental question is actually, what's the data you don't have today that you think you need tomorrow to succeed as a business? Because as I said, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of this is about the value in the data, and it is an asset. It's a commodity within a business. We're now creating data as a product. So essentially, when that's really sort of been understood, what you're trying to do with it, it's then about, okay, so what problems do you have today? And let's bring some research in. Let's bring in. If it's B2B, what's going on internally? Is it something you're trying to optimize in a workflow? Is it B2C? You're trying to improve an experience with customers at a scale, or you're trying to test something, and then it's then working out. Okay, so it's not just the minimum viable product; it's the minimum viable data that you need. And
I love that.
How do you work bottom up from the data, but also top down from the problem? So you get into into that sweet spot in the middle, which is, here's the AI that we think will help with moving the needle on the business, but also bringing value to customers. So that's kind of how I approach it, really.
Is there a mindset shift at all as well? Because thinking about this, it's a different beast, like you're saying, traditional products in companies. How do you see it in terms of the mindset shift, perhaps in the team or the business who are starting to embrace this new kind of revolution, as we'll call it?
Yeah. So, and this goes back.
Revolution. I mean, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
This goes back to capability, and a lot of what I've learned over the last 10 years, actually, and a sort of reference to the transformations that I've done, is this is about the company culture.
Yeah.
If you think about where we've come in the information age at the moment, we've got people who are using the internet now. We've gone through a history of going from large devices down to mobile devices, now right down to our watches. We've had to move people on a journey of moving with technology. We're now asking people to move with data and AI. And the challenge here is actually people can't see it. And so that's the first challenge. So this is where that anxiety comes from. And it's like, well, what's it doing? And why is it doing that? Why should I touch that? Same anxieties with when computers came out to replace typewriters. Why should I use this?
Yeah.
Why should I, this
the good old days.
A mobile? Yeah.
Okay.
But I think also then there's the building for digital, and then there's digitization. So I sort of have run into the challenges before where we've digitized. We've got everyone on screens and they've got reports. I was like, that doesn't feel like that doesn't feel like digitization. That just feels like you've gone digital. But the digitization is actually people understanding what they want to do with the data behind those digital products. And I do see this significant gap at the moment, and there's quite a naivety to around sort of like traditional product life cycle to data and AI product life cycle, because the both are very, very different in terms of building products. Yeah,
I imagine it's a much more like circular approach in a way, because what we're working super hard on here at Infinum is to embrace almost like the triple threat, we'll call it, which is like bring the strategy in at the front, power that with the engineers who actually do AI and ML as well, to make sure it's the ecosystem, the customer or client architecture is sound for this. And then we have a data analytics team then looking at what is in that pool of data. So between the three doing a kind of a coordinated dance, we should be able to then bring together this kind of like beautiful harmony between them all to go, now you're ready, but all sides need to be equal and ready before you can start that full journey in the AI space, essentially. So I think that's a really strong point. And I guess guidance is the key word here, isn't it? Because I suppose, like you're saying, you're talking about culture, people, and looking at how different areas of the business are. They all need to work as one, really. So I suppose the idea behind all of this is it's less about what can AI do for the business. It's more, first and foremost, who can help guide our company through to the projected or wanted vision that has to be defined in the first place, as opposed to just, let's build AI, it will speed up this data reporting system. I hear what you're saying. It needs to be a lot more connected with people and the business plan and the business vision than just it's a tool. It needs to have some kind of like resonance between everything in the company now. It's never just, like you're saying, apps and websites and things of the past are now kind of like the add-ons to what the company does, or it's like an extension to their brand, where this is kind of like the one tech that's going to be interlinked to everything in hindsight when you launch this. Interesting. Okay. I suppose the things around data, you mentioned data strategy there. This is one of your fortes as much as it is AI. Is there a particular area you want to focus on? Because I guess in my mind, data at the core, going through AIs, and then that's being turned into something else. Where does the responsibility lie in this data in terms of protection, usage, how it's then transformed perhaps, where does that sit? And this is something completely, new to me too. So, from some of your experience, how do you handle this data, and what are the steps there for companies?
So I think one of the big things here really is that it's about how do you want people within the culture of your business to feel about data, and that all comes down to data governance. who owns data, who stewards data, how should people look after data, who is responsible for data. It's never really written into job descriptions. What is written into a job description is do this to do that to enable this.
Yes.
But what we're finding, certainly what I'm seeing now is actually we're now challenging that data is not an IT problem. IT just create solutions for you that will store your data, but actually nurturing it, looking after it, it's in itself it is capturing a snapshot of behavior of people who have touched something that's generated that data, but it's brought not only value to people in the job that they do, but it also brings value to the brand of an organization. So that is something that I'm finding, if we go back to sort of anthropological sort of thinking or sort of social science thinking, is actually people have never been brought up with that. It's not a norm culture. Those kind of cultures, I would say, when I was at Amazon, that's baked into it because it's built up from the ground.
Yeah.
If you're going into the banking system, if you're going into the energy industry, it's a very different way of working. Whilst you've got numbers from banking that add up to probably products in the form of maybe loans or maybe perhaps stock market packages or anything to do with maybe to do with credit. The first thing probably you're not thinking about is actually, well, who are the people that touch this data and what it's being used in a different light. So so it does really open up questions of, well, if we want to shift people to start really go, you are responsible for this data and you need to nurture it, look after it. That all comes down to, well, you've got to rethink about the governance within your culture, about how do you want people to respond when you're asking them, say, you are responsible for that, you need to look after it, it's not an IT problem. But where's the training, where's the capability building? And I tend to find that those projects that I've walked into, the first thing that's been forgotten is, how do we want our data to be governed once we launch this thing? And it's then an afterthought, and then you go after that, which
I guess it's a question of ethics there as well, in terms of the interlinked.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Because and I think also this cause the very single use case mindset within businesses is what drives that. But actually, if you kind of flip this all upside down and you're starting with data and you're starting to think about governing with data, it should be about, well, who is this data for? Why do we think they might use it? What are the considerations in terms of the security of it, how it should be used, the permission that we need to put in place, who needs to give permission? And then all of a sudden what you've got is, you've then got a set of data that's being managed and governed. But then what you can build on top of it is not just one use case. You could probably build multiple use cases. And then all that you're managing is the data underneath it. And then the people are nurturing that data and being responsible with it. So that's a complete flip to how a lot of organizations work today. They're very single use case driven, and they will build the data after they've defined the business problem. And maybe they've got some customer input into that, but then they'll go, well, let's just go find this data here. I'm educating a lot at the moment with, okay, so here's the problem you're trying to solve. Here's how you currently work. Let's look at some of the ideas. Let's look at some of the value around those ideas. But let's ask the question first of all. So if this was going to be live in about 6 weeks time, how do you want people to manage and look after data, and how do you want them to be responsible with that data and ethically responsible with it? So and those questions are, like you said, they're an afterthought and left at the end.
Interesting, isn't it? I always look at AI a bit like this, data. It's almost like a triangle, isn't it? It's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? It's like you start with this big lake of data, then you need to like normalize the data to level up there, then you need to automate the data to give you some kind of like BI intelligence, then maybe use ML to start to automate further and do some things for you. Then maybe AI can help do some more suggestive stuff off the back of it. But it's like taking like someone from the kindergarten, put them into university. You need to kind of like go through that motion with it to make that thing educationally correct. So yeah, I can totally see that. And that actually leads into a question that I was going to really put to you about the future of developing further AI, in business essentially. Like, what do you see as like the steps to building, I guess you could call it ethically and responsibly correct AI, as opposed to kind of the doomsday scenario we talked about earlier with Terminator, which I know obviously is a long way away, but like, what is that balance then? Is it, is it guidance? Is it better data? Is it, where do you see that?
It's a combination of all things. For me, when I look at this now, and I walked into a project last year, it's like, build this data and AI solution. And within the first sort of 3 weeks, I said, this is not a data and AI problem. This is a change management challenge. This is about how do you want to operationalize people to shift from the way in which they give permission to access data and how they look after data. And then we can start understanding what we need to build to scale data assets, and then treat those assets as possibly value to the business, which could be sold on, or new products that don't exist today. Completely rethink about future workforce. And then it's really very much, I like to start from actually, really, I use a lot of backcasting activities where it's actually alternative futures. So let's imagine 3 different futures that could exist in 5 years' time, and then let's work backwards from those. But the single thread throughout all of those is data, and how will people evolve with each one of those. And that really does help start to challenge status quo. Are we really structured the right way that we should be structured as an organization? Do we need to incubate somewhere to actually start to develop? Common language used in consulting is a center of excellence for how we manage data.
Yeah.
But actually, building the classic change management, support on capability development. One of the things that I think a lot of people think, and I've seen, is that you can build data and AI products by using sprints. You can't, because it's very experimental. So you have to use Kanban as an approach, but you have to have an agile mindset, not use the agile framework. So I have seen a couple of sort of product managers who have like, why is this not getting built in 2 weeks? And then it's purely because the way that Kanban works is, it's a tool that's used for customer support desk, because you don't know when you're going to sort of solve a problem, but it's constantly in the backlog and it's constantly moving along. It's the same with data and AI. Until we find the right data, until we clean that data, until we find out who's validated it, until we're very clear that this is the curated data that we want to use, that could be exponential. It could be weeks, it could be months. So again, that's a very different mindset shift from traditional product lifecycle, building a digital product, from early adopters all the way through to growth, maturity, but then saturation, then decline. Data and AI products as well are, another sort of culture thing here is that they would never decline over time. The thing that has to improve is data, because then they become more competitive. Unlike sort of traditional product life cycle, and I always go back to the VHS tape, which recorded your films, and then we moved to DVD, and then we moved to Blu-ray, and now we've got on demand. Those products, those physical products, have gone. But with data and AI, you've got a chatbot. Well, the thing that powers my chatbot is actually the data, and actually the richness in the data. So if I keep improving the data, my data products improve, and it's cyclical. So again, this again is education. This is about, you completely think in an infinite circular way of thinking.
The circular way. Absolutely.
Keep doing it. So it is an education piece. and that's how I sort of tie it back. Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, it ties in nicely to our slogan here. Never stop at Infinum. So that's quite beautiful and serendipitous as well. But I do love that that statement. Like, is AI essentially the masquerade for change management? Is that the cool facelift of change management? It's kind of that in some respects, with a load of other perilous, like technology-based, activities to be done. That's great. I mean, there's so much there to unpack, and I think hopefully with some of that insight, it is the education, it is about the data, and it is about strategy first, not just build it, turn it on, everything's great. I definitely hear what you're saying there, Tim. And I suppose just to kind of move away from doomsday and big, problems that might happen with AI, and just lighten the conversation a little bit. So you've been doing this for a long time now. You even built your own company around how to help, I guess, coach and guide companies in this space. The name of that company is Zombie Molecule, and I have no idea why it's called that, but I'm on the edge of my seat to know why it's called that, and then we'll move into taking some questions from the audience.
Yeah, so it actually was a name that sort of came up a couple of years ago in my mind. Zombie molecules actually exist in the human body. They're actually dead cells. As we've learned more around our gut, since precision medicine has sort of evolved, and AI has evolved. Actually, we've learned more about our cells in our bodies. Now, those cells in our bodies that die can actually be brought back to life, and that's through metabolism, and they are classed as zombie molecules. So for me, working in healthcare and life science for over 10 years now, one of the things that I am gradually seeing is that there is a lot of dead data that lives in companies that could be brought back to life if it was nurtured and repaired. So a lot of the work that I do is help companies to rethink about, well, look, you don't have to go out shopping and you have to buy a load of data again. You don't have to go and migrate for a fourth time all your data again because it wasn't done right the first 3 times. So I bring this perspective in with organizations around, actually, let's go back to basics. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Where's the data in that problem? Do you have it today? Do you not have it today? Does it live in an archive? Has it been touched before? How do we bring it back to life? It will not come back as a zombie, but it comes back as a different shape and form where it acts differently. So you're changing its behavior. So essentially, that's what I've just tied in all those years of sort of engineering, social science, brought it all together, and it's helping clients now that I'm working with. They're not starting with data. They're starting with, I want a screen, I want a report. I just want these AI solutions in, and it's really helping them to think about data strategy. How do they want their company to shift to more data-driven thinking rather than report-driven thinking? I'm testing and iterating the business as well, because the value proposition of it always shifts as fast as the technology. So I'm now working with Gen AI solutions, which are how do we improve the knowledge base systems and the confidence in the knowledge base, where Gen AI can improve its lack of naivety on that data, and actually give responses that, well, this feels pretty genuine, and why do I need 5 people to do that? How I can get those 5 people to do something else. I'm learning as I go along with this as well about the possibilities with it.
Absolutely. I feel like it's a journey for everyone, both in a technological way, maybe even like a slightly spiritual way / business way. But look, let's just pause for a second there, because we've got loads of questions coming through from the viewers. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to turn attention to some great questions coming up just for you, Tim, about AI. Okay, so the first one is, can you provide a specific example of an AI integration you've seen that was successfully implemented and yielded productivity gains? Just to kick things off.
Yeah, I have seen 2 of those. Yeah.
All right, they exist. Love it.
They do exist. Yeah. So I'm going to use I'm going to use one sort of around working in the healthcare system. This was actually around optimizing bed management. So within the NHS system, I think it's no surprise that we continuously hear about what is going on is saturation. There are no beds. There are horrendous waiting times. So this transformation was actually putting in a new kind of master data platform to completely rethink about not just bed management, but actually how do people move around a hospital, and actually then how do we take that data around movement, and how do we start to use AI to predict movement so that we can think about operational workflow improvement on clinical pathways. So that was actually quite successful for two reasons. It helped out in the pandemic because I started it before the pandemic, had to work it way through during the pandemic, and then delivered it after the pandemic. And essentially the problem that we managed to solve was within a lot of hospitals, it's very difficult to know how long patients have been in hospital. Some patients get lost, some patients get stranded. There are outliers in different wards that they shouldn't be. So, renal patients living in cancer wards, or elderly patients living in perhaps serious dementia wards, something like that, when they've not got that. So what we managed to do was we actually managed to put out, first of all, a data system that collated accurately where are all the patients. And that hadn't been done since 1995.
Wow.
So this project was something probably like 3 or 4 years ago. So that's how long this had taken to solve. How they were doing it was just sending people around to count patients in every single bed. And they were doing that every morning, every afternoon, and they were missing patients that had moved on. And then they were entering the data just before they went home, and then it was miscalculated, obviously human error, things like that. So there was a lot of decentralization thinking in terms of actually, let's change people's jobs in wards. Let's get them to enter the key minimum viable data that we need to learn about the operations of the hospital. So that was 4 key data points, which was, is the patient here? When are they going home? Have they been asked to go home? Are they moving around the hospital anywhere else? Using that data, we were able to then show a clear picture of what's the demand coming into the hospital, what's the capacity today, and what's the discharge. And the outcome of that moved a 21% visibility of patients to 95%. And that problem alone, just from data, that was before AI, was the head of bed management, who I work very closely with, was, I can now see all my patients. I don't have to send people around and chase them. Now what do I? And then it really got them thinking. This is a person who had gone through the ranks of nursing, climbed up through the ranks of the NHS system, knew nothing about AI, but started to talk about the insights that they wanted to see in terms of, what I'd love to see, how can I optimize this specialism? Because I always get bottlenecks here. So that's where we brought in a specialist AI model that looked at, here's the amount of patients, from the demand to the capacity to the discharge, and here's how we can optimize that flow. And that was then the journey for scaling. And then we scaled out to about 6 other models after that. So, and they were all connected to clinical pathways, and then linked in with operations. So, but it took, if we took the pandemic out, it took 24 months really to realize that, because the big challenge with it was, again, not the technology implemented, it was the change management. It was getting people to enter data in and the governance around that. And that was the big challenge to the integration.
It's a great example, and I love the fact it's so based on human well-being and human-centered, outcomes, based on the fact AI can help with that. And it's so interesting that it isn't so much about a technical challenge. It's, again, a human challenge to adapt to the technology in the business. That's a great answer. I have a second question here, which I'm actually really curious about this. We get a lot of guess you could say, clients asking us to help them innovate with a form of automation, AI, machine learning. But the question always comes up is, what is the best practice of measuring an ROI or a KPI, or just essentially something that signifies AI implementation has created an uplift in some kind of positive outcome? So you talked about there on the medical side of things, there was a positive organizational outcome, but can you actually measure AI as an uplift in a business with faster speeds, better outcomes, cheaper, XYZ?
Yeah, so it's a great question, because I think a lot of the time I've sat in a lot of strategy meetings where we've done a lot of business analyst modeling, and we've gone, well, with this you can do this, and this is what that will save. And I think I'm reminiscing from McKinsey days now, where there was a lot of talking about what's the value that gets released, the value at stake is what they called it. So I think that the thing again, really, it goes down to what is it you're trying to shift? What are you trying to move? And what's the baseline metric that you've got today, and where you're trying to get to? And what's the makeup of that metric that you're doing today? Who's doing that? What's the workflow around that? How does that all cascade up? The current processes, what do people do? How do you get that data? The amount of times I ask, what spreadsheet does that live in? And does that really live in a flat file, or does that really live in a central database? There are a lot of people that hide data in a spreadsheet, not because they're trying to be malicious, not because they're trying to create life hard work problems. It's because they're trying to do their job and deliver under such pressure that technology has its limits when it's broken. So they'll hack it their own way, and they'll create their own flat file. So understanding the behaviors of people, first of all, and around how do you aggregate and get to metrics, first of all, and what are the behaviors of that, is the first key thing, and that's your baseline. So then the second thing is then looking at, right, so what's the minimum viable data set that I need to get to where I want to get to move the needle? And one of the activities that I use with this is I've repurposed Lego. I've repurposed the user journey map. I've turned it into a data journey. And I actually take the workflow with a client, and I'll go, right, okay, let's map out all the data. Let's map out all the jobs that people are doing. Let's map out that process flow. And let's see what's the volume of data that's being used. And what you tend to find, and I use Lego bricks for this reason, is you see a lot of Lego bricks. And then you ask the question, do we really need all those Lego bricks? Because the Lego bricks represent the data. Sure. And what you tend to find is, actually, well, no, we don't need all of that. What we really need is just 30% of that to give us this here. So you can't. So when it comes to KPI, it's not just about a metric on commercial or commercial rate. It's also about KPIs now around how people are performing, and actually how do I optimize ways of working? Because a lot of people are working with, well, I'll just do this data and I'll use that data. But actually, if you really lock it down to, well, I'm trying to move to this data set to release this value, that really helps. So when you get to that defined valuable data set, then you can start going, right, let's go back to our core need problem. Let's go back to why we think maybe AI might be able to release some new KPIs or improve our KPIs. And actually, let's start testing it and build a prototype. And you can just build a prototype. I think the fastest prototype I've ever built is 2 weeks before going operational for an AI solution. Wow. And you just get data scientists, data engineers, machine learning engineers in a room with strategists, designers, and you can hack it all out and build the minimum viable data set, the minimum viable product, and then you can stick it in front of users, and then you can start measuring from your baseline, and then you can start counting, well, how many people did it take to do that? How fast did it take to do that? And then you're starting to get some metrics. Go, well, actually, I think we can start moving the needle. Yeah. And then you can go back to your business strategist and look at the hypothesis that was written down, which was maybe in a hypothesis tree, or it's been documented in a spreadsheet, or whatever way that they work. And then you can go back and go, right, we've got a discrepancy here. How do we improve that now? And you start to continue to iterate the model, and you start reducing the errors, because you're not going to just get it overnight with a model and straight away you're going to start doing KPI. It's about actually iterating and being agile with the model, and then just tweaking its performance and monitoring, and then you can start looking at, have I released value through there, and then you start getting your hard metrics for KPI. So
got it.
Agile mindset, agile experimentation, that kind of thinking as well.
Okay. We have actually, we'll put this as the last question. This is from Davo, and thank you for that. Considering that 73% of companies feel unprepared in the integration of AI, listen to our stats from our report, what are the key steps that they should take to enhance their readiness? Big question to finish on. What do companies do to prepare for this? If they're going to invest a lot of money in AI, what could they do to prepare for their readiness?
So I think, I mean, I was in a corporate last year, and there were, I don't know whether the phrase still goes, but I came across some lifers and some people who had been in the organization for 25 years. And I thought, does that still happen? And I think one of the things that I really walked away from that there is actually social validation. Who do you trust? It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Sure.
And I think one of the things that I've seen really powerfully that work is actually going back to communities, and how do we share knowledge? How do we talk about things? How do we tell stories? And I'm thinking back to things like lunch and learns, pop-up desks, knowledge sessions, people who walk around, maybe like ask me anything questions, like on the back of their t-shirt, something like that. I do walk around a lot of corporations today, and I go, where is all of that? And I go, oh, there's a poster, but then there was the safety message that was put over that poster. But who looks at the poster? I remember when I was in Facebook, it was about 7 years ago. A friend of mine was working there, and I went to the bathroom, and the way that they innovate is that they stuck posters above the urinals for the gentlemen, and for the ladies, they stuck them on the back of the toilet doors, and they communicated what was going on with latest initiatives, education, QR code, and literally people were reading them, and they saw huge engagement. And I think the other thing that I walked away from that there, which I learned in my research practices, was they created a museum of user research, and they just left it open within the business, and they linked it with coffee machines and everything like and free snacks. And people took the free snacks and they took the coffee and they walked around. But what they were doing is they were reading about their customers, and they were learning about how their customers behave. There was also like internal customers as well. And it was just sort of putting things in, and it is really very much going back to basics as like simple things. We have museums, we have libraries. Why are we interested in going and seeing these things? Because we want to learn about behavior, we want to learn about history. That's no different from actually you could do those things in a business and just put down, here's what we're learning about our customers. And you could just show and treat it like a museum of history. And that is just the best way to communicate confidence, remove anxieties, start debates, start questions, start getting people talking to each other and networking and unsiloing each other. And I think we've lost that a bit in corporations. So I'd love to see a lot of that come back. And if you're not seeing it, then the entrepreneur in me is like, there's no one stopping you, just do it. And you'll soon know when someone tells you, because then a decision will start getting made.
Love that. Yeah, that's actually a really great point. Actually, a great point to end on, because I suppose what we're trying to do here at Infinum with Delivered is kind of what you're saying, is like we're just trying to open source knowledge, not secret source it, and just share as much as possible with the hope that someone will take some value from it, implement it into their business, perpetuate it forward. So, I mean, that's a great ending, I would say, Tim, for this whole long and big revolution ahead of us, I would call it. So,
Yeah.
hey, Tim, look, thank you so much for all the insight. It's been great talking to you, and thank you for everything today. And also, finally, just before we leave, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. Just search my name, Tim Daines. You can find me there. And I've actually written a course at the moment on data and AI product management, how to build production ready products. So that's running now. And there's a next batch of course sign-ups for starting in March. So if people are interested, then they can sign up there.
All right. Well, Tim, thanks very much. And it's been a great pleasure to have you on. Thanks again, mate.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Been great being with you.
Well, thank you, Tim. Once again, great knowledge, great sharing. And thank you to all of you for watching today and your insight and questions into the discussion of AI. A huge, huge discussion. So what next? Tim mentioned that he has a course on product AI management. Feel free to check that out. We'll put the link in the chat. You can check that out there. And to keep giving you more value in this huge discussion around AI, you can also check out the AI report we've done at Infinum that has loads of industry stats, even some cheat sheets on how to kind of get into the strategic thinking around AI and things that you should just know about if you're in any space around innovation, AI, you're a business leader. So check that out. We'll also put that into the chat down below somewhere. And lastly, if you want to not read anything or talk to a robot, you can just talk to human beings at Infinum. And we're happy to have a conversation, to talk about your business needs, business strategy around AI, and we'd love to help guide you through that whole process. And finally, we have one announcement for next delivered. We have something very different than AI. We have a very human-centric episode coming up next in February with my guest, Jason Grant, who is an expert in AI and basically bridging innovation with business, users, psychology, and technology. All that together using design thinking and the best way to create really kind of customer-centric products that matter. And he's had a rich history in helping brands such as Amex, BT, HSBC. So if you're interested in those kind of things around design, innovation with design, UX thinking, then please join in our next Delivered, which you can find on infinum.com/delivers, where you can find out all the latest news. There's our newsletter there to sign up to, and I would love to see you there. So that being said, I'm Chris Bradshaw. This has been Delivered. I wish you all a very beautiful day. Thanks for joining. Goodbye.